Nobody cares about your business. My plan comes first before anything else. My daughter's birthday parties are the biggest priority. If you don't get her gifts right away, I'll ruin your daughter's funeral." A deafening yell from my mother-in-law made me regret picking up her call, especially at a funeral. I was shaking with anger. "My name is Amy. I'm a housewife in my mid-40s with a high school-aged daughter. You might think a high school girl would be fussy about makeup and fashion, rejecting clothes her mother buys, but my daughter is different. She gets along with me and gladly wears the clothes I pick out. She's a considerate and kind girl, but she's not like most girls her age. She can't lead a normal life, putting on makeup, dressing up, falling in love, and enjoying her student life. It's tough." "Are you okay? How's your fever?" "It's a bit down." "Want to eat something?" "I'm not hungry. I don't want anything." "You shouldn't say that. If you don't eat, you won't have any energy. I'll prepare some soup for you, okay?" As I worried over my bedridden daughter, I continued with the household chores. My daughter, Hannah, is sickly and suffers from a weak constitution. There's a medical term for her condition, but I won't go into details here. A week after Hannah was born, her umbilical cord fell off and blood gushed out. We rushed her to the hospital where they diagnosed her with a certain disease. Since then, despite numerous treatments, she has never fully recovered and lives with the disease. Regular hospital visits are a must, and due to the side effects of her medication, her health often deteriorates. During severe periods, she has to be hospitalized. Since becoming a high school student, she's hardly been able to attend school. By any standard, it's unlikely she'll graduate at this rate. Nevertheless, Hannah goes to school on days she's well. On those days, she tries to be like a normal high school girl, fussing over her hairstyle, which brings a smile to my face. She doesn't wear makeup because it's against school rules. A diligent and good girl, even when suffering from illness, she strives to live with a cheerful spirit. I am proud to have a daughter like her. My husband is equally smitten with our daughter. If she becomes bedridden, he's quick to say, "I'll take the day off work and look after her." Of course, I have to give him a little push and send him off to work. We need him to keep bringing home the bacon, or we'll fall into a financial crisis. When I assure him that I'll take good care of Hannah, he reluctantly heads off to work. That's our everyday life. We're worried about our daughter, but our family is in good spirits, and I have a strong bond with my husband. I was blessed, living a peaceful life, but there was one person who wasn't pleased with our situation. Hannah is running a fever again. It's just pitiful. I wonder who she takes after. "Mother-in-law, what brings you here today?" "What's the matter? Can't a mother visit her son's home? You're such a cold-hearted daughter-in-law. A frail granddaughter and a demon for a daughter-in-law. Lord, if I could only have the post-retirement years that I dreamed of." "Yes, the person who is unhappy with our household is my mother-in-law. She frequently visits our home, which is just 3 bus stops away, and constantly spews her classic passive-aggressive remarks. She's enjoyed tormenting me ever since we got married. Now she's also unpleasant towards Hannah. Doesn't she find her own granddaughter adorable? My son never ran a fever this frequently. Amy, isn't this something from your side of the family?" "Mother-in-law, as I've explained countless times, Hannah's illness isn't hereditary. It's—" "No, I'm sure your family's genes are playing a role here. I always knew taking you into our family was a bad idea." My mother-in-law seems fixated on belittling my family lineage, and her snide remarks never end. Eventually, I've grown accustomed to dealing with her, realizing that arguing is a waste of time. I let out a sigh, grabbed the freshly made soup, and headed to Hannah's room. "Hey, I'm not finished talking yet." I could hear her yelling from behind, but I just ignored her. Once I entered Hannah's room, her voice became faint. "Grandma came over again, didn't she?" "Right, same old mother-in-law bashing. No helping it, I guess. Grandma's just—" My daughter Hannah let out a raised smile, but I know she understands. There's no way she can't hear my mother-in-law's loud voice, yet Hannah never speaks ill of her grandmother. On the contrary, she'll make a guilty face and say, "I'm sorry, Mom. It's because of me." "Hannah, it's not your fault at all." She's not at fault in the slightest, yet Hannah apologizes to me. I don't want her to feel this way, so my husband and I always greet her with smiles. We create a cheerful atmosphere, not wanting her to dwell on negative thoughts, but my mother-in-law destroys that atmosphere in an instant. As I hugged Hannah tightly, I bit my lip, feeling her thin body so unlike a healthy high school girl. Feeling Hannah's warmth, I felt a sense of relief but also realized that I must start keeping a distance from my mother-in-law. My days are occupied with taking care of my frail daughter, and on the rare days she goes to school, I worry non-stop. I took back our house keys from my meddling mother-in-law. Days were filled with endless quarrels with her, my husband working hard for our beloved family, and my laughing daughter Hannah. Despite everything, they were peaceful days, and I thought they would last forever. I don't know why I believed that. There's no such thing as forever. Everything that begins must also end. On a rainy summer day, Hannah fell ill amidst the unrelenting heat. The doctor looked grim as he reviewed the test results. I held my trembling daughter in my arms, and then she was admitted to the hospital. Summer vacation had begun, and by the time it ended, Hannah was still in the hospital, still receiving treatment. Those were incredibly difficult and painful days. Hannah looked like she was suffering so much. Even so, I believed she would recover. She would surely get better. More than anything, Hannah herself believed that. But Hannah passed away. Dad, Mom, I love you. Those were her last words before she embarked on her far-off journey. Looking up at the dreary sky as the autumn rain continued to pour, I was in tears. The tears wouldn't stop. It was raining during the funeral, too. It felt like the sky was crying for me as I was too busy to even shed tears. The tears I shed on the day Hannah passed away have now dried up. I was that busy. My husband, too, had taken time off work and was rushing around. I was swamped with contacting relatives and Hannah's school. That's the only way I could cope. I couldn't stand it unless I was busy. The loss I felt from losing Hannah was that immense. Many people came to the funeral in the rain. Even though she didn't go to school much, many of her friends came to pay their respects, and they all cried. There were kids who screamed and cried out in disbelief. Some broke down, crying, saying they would love her forever. Watching them, I felt a perverse sense of happiness. Everyone loved Hannah. Knowing that she was a child who was so loved, I couldn't help but feel happy. Many people spoke to me, and they all praised Hannah. My parents hugged me as they cried, and I couldn't help but break down in tears. It was then that my phone, which was in the pocket of my black funeral attire, vibrated. I had my phone on me in case someone needed directions to the funeral, so I quickly stepped away from my seat and looked at the screen. The caller ID showed it was my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had already passed away, and although I had contacted my mother-in-law, she hadn't come to the hospital during Hannah's final moments, claiming it was impossible because she was far away. She said she couldn't attend the funeral today either because she had something important to do. But I wondered if she might have changed her mind and wanted to say goodbye to her grandchild. So I answered the phone, but I instantly regretted it. "Amy, what on earth are you doing?" she yelled at me. "Huh? I'm at Hannah's funeral. Stop joking around and get over here right now to your place." "That's impossible. What are you talking about?" "Right back at you. I told you I had something important to do today, didn't I? Hurry back and help me out. I don't have anything more important than my daughter's funeral. Nobody cares about your business. My plan comes first before anything else." What on earth is she talking about? As a mother, my daughter's funeral is the most important thing right now, and it's wrong of my mother-in-law not to even care about her grandchild's funeral. My mother-in-law had been adamant about not going to the funeral, no matter what my husband said. "Why do I have to help you with your stuff? If it's more important than your granddaughter's funeral, why don't you handle it yourself? You're my daughter-in-law. You're supposed to help me." "I don't understand what you mean. I'm celebrating my super precious daughter's birthday. There's nothing more important than this in the world." "Excuse me." I couldn't help but take an extraordinarily long time to respond. "What did you just say?" "My daughter is coming home after such a long time, and coincidentally, it's her birthday too. We have to celebrate it grandly, don't we? Like I care. So, I need to thoroughly clean my house and prepare a huge feast. Come over here fast." "But as I said, I'm in the middle of a funeral right now. I don't care about that. My daughter is more important than my granddaughter. Also, bring a present with a budget of over $500. Hurry up. If you don't bring any gift right now, I'll ruin your funeral." Click. I hung up on her. I couldn't stand to listen any longer. If I had to hear any more from my mother-in-law, I felt like I'd march over there with a baseball bat. Just how selfish can she be? Prioritizing her daughter over her granddaughter at a time like this? I'm not saying they should be compared, but to say her daughter's birthday is more important than Hannah's funeral. She must be kidding. I told my husband, Mike, everything that had happened. and we decided to ignore her. Mike tried to contact Sandy, but either she was still on the plane or we just couldn't reach her. Pulling myself together and regaining my composure, I returned to shedding tears at my daughter's funeral. The day after the funeral, Sandy visited our place. She had read Mike's email and flew here right away. She thought it would be faster to come home than to try to get in touch while traveling from where she lives, but it took her a long time to get here. In the end, she didn't make it to the funeral. Bowing her head in apology after paying her respects at the altar, she shared various stories with us. Stories I had never heard before about my daughter and Sandy, whom we hardly ever got a chance to see. Listening to them, I found myself reminiscing about my daughter when she was little, and once again, I started to cry. In the end, my mother-in-law didn't even bother to come to pay her respects. My sister-in-law, Sandy, deeply bowed her head and apologized for this. "I'll do something about my mom," she said before leaving, but I wondered what she meant by that. A few days later, the reality that my daughter was gone still hadn't sunk in, and I found myself in her room, holding on to the memories she left behind. I gently stroked her study desk. The room, untouched since her death, was filled with so many memories of her. Just as I felt like I was about to cry again, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Startled, I quickly wiped away my tears and looked at the monitor. To my surprise, it was my mother-in-law, the same woman who had injured both my husband and me with her inappropriate remarks on the day of the funeral. She hadn't come to pay her respects and hadn't shown up in the days since. What does she want now? I had no intention of opening the door, so I responded via the intercom. "What can I do for you, mother-in-law?" "Oh, Amy, please help me," she said. Her unexpected plea for help left me puzzled. I might end up joining my granddaughter if this keeps up. "Please help me," she exclaimed, saying something unthinkable. Wondering what was going on, I reluctantly opened the front door and my mother-in-law fell in. "What's going on?" "Help me, my daughter, my daughter." While I was trying to understand what she was saying, a figure suddenly came into view. Well, here you are, Mom," the figure said. It was Sandy. She had a smiling face, but it gave off a silent pressure. "She's here, huh? What? Seeing the pale face of my mother-in-law, who screamed at the sight of Sandy, I was completely stunned. What on earth is happening? "Oh, come on, don't say things like she's here. It's rude. See, Mom, it's your cute daughter, right?" No, not cute at all. What in the world is going on? Just the other day, she was talking about her daughter's birthday being more important than my daughter's funeral. What happened in just a matter of a few days? While I stood there bewildered, Sandy handed something to our mother-in-law. "Don't worry, the next part is much easier. Here, you just need to put this on your head and go about your life." Saying this, Sandy put it on my mother-in-law's head. She shook it off and hid behind me. "I'm not wearing that." "Why not? People will think I'm a weirdo if I walk around with that on my head." Wondering what on earth it was, I looked at the object that had fallen to the floor. It was a mask, not the kind you would see at a fair, but something else. A mask that you might see worn by a tribe living deep in Africa during some strange ritual, the kind of thing a shaman might like. And why does Sandy have something like this? Why put it on my mother-in-law's head? "This mask is used for fortune-telling," Sandy explained. "Where I live," Sandy explained in response to my question, "this mask has an interesting history. It's a great craft work that has been passed down since ancient times." I was stunned. "Well, yeah, it looks like it. So you're going to put this mask on top of my mother-in-law's head, not on her face?" "Right, if it's on her face, she wouldn't be able to see anything. This isn't an ordinary mask with holes for the eyes. If it did have holes, I wouldn't mind letting her wear it on her face." "And what happens when she puts it on?" "Oh, you didn't know? This mask has a demon repelling effect." As if I would know about such an effect. A demon repellent, exactly, no matter how hard you think about it. She's clearly possessed by a demon, right? Sandy pointed at my mother-in-law. Her own daughter saying such a thing. So this is what she meant by, "I'll do something about my mom." If she wears this for a few days, I think she'll definitely become a normal human being with morals. I've been trying several methods for the past few days. A different method. I had her wear a necklace of garlic and run around the neighborhood. Isn't that for vampires, not demons? Or are vampires also demons? I'm not quite sure, but oh well. But what's with the running? Is that why my mother-in-law's been looking so worn out? That must have smelled terrible. Garlic isn't that bad unless you cut it open. You know that's not really the point, but that's beside the point. The issue is that she wore that and spent a few days running. I really wish I could have seen that. Do you want to see the pictures? Oh yes, please. Sandy has pictures. What a pro. You guys, what are you so happy about? Show a little more sympathy for me. My mother-in-law started to complain as Sandy and I were laughing and looking at the pictures. I almost forgot she was here. Why do we have to show sympathy for you? Sandy looked up from her phone and glared at her mother-in-law. Why? Because you're my daughter. If you want sympathy from your daughter, why don't you become a person deserving of sympathy? Do you think there's anyone else as sincere as I am? My mother-in-law retorted. Where's the good in someone who dismisses their grandchild's funeral as whatever? Sandy exclaimed, her mouth wide open in anger. When I rushed home for my niece's funeral, I found you just lying at home. When I asked if the funeral was over, you boldly said you didn't go. I thought maybe you were sick, but you were just doing push-ups to show how fit you were. Push-ups? I echoed in disbelief. She wouldn't even go light an incense at the wake. I don't care about my birthday. Screw that, Sandy continued. What are you talking about? It's a parent's duty to celebrate their child's birthday. I've never heard of a grandmother prioritizing her daughter's birthday over her grandchild's funeral. The shouting match grew so intense that both Sandy and my mother-in-law were panting heavily. That's why I'm saying we need to cleanse this rotten character of yours as if you've been possessed by a demon, and start over. Sandy cried out, tears suddenly rolling down her cheeks. It's pitiful that Hannah had a grandmother like you. Her words stuck in my throat. Sandy loved my daughter too. Even if the time they spent together was short, there was no doubt that Sandy loved her. Holding back the tears that threatened to spill, I stared hard at my mother-in-law. She faltered for a moment under my gaze. Mother-in-law, I said firmly, what did you do for my daughter when she was alive? And I'm not talking about giving her stuff. You didn't even care about her, did you? So what if I didn't? She snapped. There's no way I could have doted on such a frail child just because she's my granddaughter. But my daughter adored you, I said quietly. At my unexpected words, my mother-in-law was at a loss. I told her to wait a moment and went back into the house. From my daughter's room, I took something and returned to my mother-in-law, who was still at the entrance. Then I handed her a letter. What's this? She asked, looking puzzled. It's a letter from my daughter to you. My mother-in-law looked back and forth in surprise between me and the letter. In my hand was a letter certainly addressed to Grandma in my daughter's handwriting. She tentatively opened it and began to read. As she read, her eyes widened, and before we knew it, tears were welling up. No, I didn't do anything for Hannah, she whispered, her voice breaking. I was never kind to her or showed her love. Crying out, my mother-in-law collapsed to the ground on her knees. Picking up the letter that had fallen from her hand, my sister-in-law also read it. Sorry for not being a healthy granddaughter. I'll try to be stronger, so don't hate me. I love you, Grandma. Hannah. Even though she was such an unloving old woman, Hannah was a kind child. Yes, she truly was, I murmured, my sister-in-law nodding with tears streaming down her face. Tears wouldn't stop from my eyes either. I'm sorry for being such a terrible grandmother. I'm sorry. Forgive me, Hannah, my mother-in-law sobbed, bowing deeply on the ground. The three of us cried together for a long time. When my husband came home to find us in tears, he was taken aback. My sister-in-law briefly explained, then took my mother-in-law home. Despite her shaky steps, my mother-in-law clutched Hannah's letter tightly. A few days later, my mother-in-law expressed her wish to pay respects at Hannah's memorial portrait. I firmly declined but told her it would be fine for her to visit the grave after the burial service. Once the mourning period concluded, over the phone she said quietly, I'm sorry. No matter how much she reflects and regrets, I can forgive her cold attitude toward Hannah while she was alive, and certainly not her behavior on the day of the funeral. I plan to continue being almost entirely estranged from her, and I think my mother-in-law has sensed that. The pushy and slay old woman she once was is nowhere to be seen anymore. My sister-in-law returned overseas, and my husband keeps contact with my mother-in-law to a bare minimum. My mother-in-law now leads a lonely life in her old age, having developed dementia. Luckily, we quickly found a retirement home for her, and now she lives there. Of course, I don't visit her, and my husband only goes when it's necessary. According to him, my mother-in-law keeps murmuring, I'm sorry, Hannah. Even hearing that, I feel nothing. No matter how many years have passed, I can't forgive her, and I don't even want to. But then I think of Hannah, and my gaze falls on a picture of her smiling happily. If it were Hannah, that kind girl, she probably would have forgiven my mother-in-law. No, she probably never even held a grudge in the first place. She was such a kind child. Mom, I love you. I thought I heard her voice and gently wiped my eyes.